Today we're going to be talking about some absolute must-have accessories when working with lasers, and that would be something to handle the smoke and fumes. So what I have here is the brand new xTool Air Purifier 2, also known as the AP2, and I have the xTool Inline Fan 2, which they're calling the IF2, and both of these are brand new offerings from xTool that greatly improve upon previous designs. And they've got some really nice new features. For example, both of those units can be controlled and connected to xTool machines wirelessly through a Bluetooth connection. Now, because both of these products were launched at the exact same time, and I believe at some point xTool was referring to them as a safety set, there was a little bit of confusion about how they're intended to be used, and they're not intended to be used together. So it's kind of a one or the other situation. Now, if you're working in a workspace where you do not have the ability to ventilate your smoke and fumes outside, then you're going to want to look at the AP2. And that's because it's an air filtration system, and xTool is claiming that it has an over 99% air filtration efficiency, and that's entirely due to the multiple layers of filtration that you can see here in the front of this machine. Now, if you do have the ability to ventilate your smoke and fumes outside, then you're going to want to look at the IF2, and that's because it's an extremely high-powered inline fan, and they're saying that the fan blades spin up to 14,000 RPM and provide an extremely high velocity airflow to carry your smoke and fumes from your workspace to the outside, and that includes through very long lengths of hose. Now, I'm going to explain these situations in a lot more detail throughout this video, so stick around for that. And I'm going to also show you what's included with each of these machines. And we're going to be using the xTool F1 Ultra hooked up to the AP2, and I'm going to run through a bunch of sample projects, and I'm going to communicate to you guys what I can or cannot smell as I'm running through those different materials, which traditionally are actually very smelly or stinky. And for those of you guys who are interested in potentially purchasing one of these, I've got links in the video description down below, as well as in the comment section, so you guys can find a discount code as well as links to the best deals. Right now, xTool is running some promotional prices on these things, so use those links below so you don't miss those promotional prices. They're priced very aggressively right now for a limited time, so go check those out.
We'll begin with the unboxing of the AP2, and I'll show you guys everything that's included with this unit. If you guys have ever purchased an xTool product in the past, you'll know that they take great care in packaging their products, so it's no surprise that this machine showed up in great shape. And this thing is pretty heavy, so depending on how strong you are, you may need somebody to help you lift it. In the box, you'll get an accessory kit as well as a cover for the front of the machine. And the first thing you'll notice is that on the front of the machine, all of the layers of filtration are color-coded as well as numbered. You can replace each of those individual layers as needed, and I'll show you guys later that in the xTool Creative Space software, it actually keeps track of the lifespan of each of those layers. When first getting started with the AP2, you will need to remove each of these layers, and in the instructions it tells you to install them from the bottom up, but you're instructed not to remove the first layer, which is known as the cyclone layer. It's not entirely clear why, but it sounds like they don't want you to break the seal on the first cyclone layer. Then you can take the front cover and it just attaches on magnetically. Inside of the accessory box, you'll get some hose, you'll get a power cable, the Bluetooth dongle, which we'll get to a little bit later, and some different hose adapters, as well as a hose clamp. The instruction manual does a fairly good job of outlining which of the hose adapters corresponds to which xTool machines. You just have to pay attention to some of these smaller details on these hose adapters. For example, which side has this tab here, and that will be the side that corresponds to the hose. And in a moment, I'll demonstrate how that threads directly onto the flexible hose, whereas the other side would go to a machine. And this adapter here looks like it's compatible with the S1 as well as the F1 Ultra, whereas this smaller adapter that I'm holding right now looks to be compatible with the smaller hose that comes with the regular sized F1 as well as the xTool M1. For other machines like the D1 Pro or the P2, P2S, you can take this small adapter and you can attach the original hose that came with those machines or the xTool enclosure, and you can use the hose clamp to clamp that original hose onto this smaller adapter. I'm going to be demonstrating the use of the AP2 with the F1 Ultra, so I'm going to grab this adapter. Take the larger end with the tab on the inside, and it just threads directly onto that hose. You saw that I expanded the hose a little bit first, and then I can just thread it on. And I'm going to do this on both sides because one of those sides is going to attach directly to the inlet at the top of the AP2, and the other end is going to go directly into the F1 Ultra. Now, both of those hose adapters are identical, and they also fit the bottom, which is the exhaust, and that's what I was pointing to. But since you only get 2 of those adapters, if you're using them on, let's say, the F1 Ultra, well, now you don't have any adapters left. Now, if you want to be very cautious and you want to exhaust the outlet of the AP2 outdoors, I've got an adapter here that allows you to attach a 4-inch hose, which is great for ventilation, and you can get those hoses in very long lengths. I'll put a link in the video description down below. It fits directly onto the back of the AP2 as well as the F1 Ultra and the IF2, which we'll talk about in a minute, and you can now vent the exhaust outside. But for this video, I'm not venting anything outside. This is my setup, and I'm exhausting into open air, and I'm working in a closed space. I really want to test how well this thing works. And to get it to work with the newer xTool machines, it's super easy. All you need to do is plug the Bluetooth dongle into one of the USB ports on the back of the newer machines like the F1 Ultra, the S1, as well as the P2S, and inside of xTool Creative Space, it'll automatically be recognized as an accessory. And this is where you can control parameters such as the airflow level, and if you set it to auto, xTool Creative Space will take care of that airflow level for you depending on which material you're using, so it's very smart in that sense. And another really nice thing you can do in here is monitor how much life is left on each of those layers of filtration. And if you've got an older machine, such as let's say the D1 Pro, you can still very easily control the airflow level with the buttons on the top of the AP2. Now, if you're not looking to filter the smoke and fumes, but you're looking to just push them outside through a door or a window as efficiently and quickly as possible, then you're going to want to look at the IF2. And this thing is basically a very powerful inline fan that has smart control, just like the AP2, where you can hook it up with the Bluetooth dongle. So they basically made a very powerful fan and shrunk it down to a very manageable size and allow you to control it directly from your machine or xTool Creative Space. And it comes with similar accessories to the AP2, so you'll get the Bluetooth dongle, as well as a bunch of hose adapters, some length of hose, as well as some mounting hardware, so you can mount the IF2 to a wall, for example. And it has this controller where you can control it manually if you have an older machine. And so if it's still not entirely clear what this thing is for, essentially it's going to go between your machine and the point at which you ventilate outside, like a door or a window. And it's going to boost the airflow because the small fans that are generally integrated into the back of machines like the F1 Ultra are not powerful enough to push the smoke and fumes through, for example, 20 feet of hose if you have to go that far. The inlet and the outlet are clearly marked on the IF2, and there's a special air inlet adapter that twists and locks into place. And if you don't have it correctly seated, it will throw an error code on the top of the IF2. And similar to what I just showed you on the AP2, there are several different solutions for hooking up the hose to whatever machine you're using. And in this case, I'm just using the standard adapters here that fit directly onto the back of the F1 Ultra and then slip onto the inlet of the IF2. On the outlet side, you can use more xTool hose, but these things aren't generally that long. So if you only have a short distance and you have more of the xTool flexible hose, it's definitely a solution that you can use. But I typically find myself needing a much longer hose, and for that I'll switch to 4-inch ducting because it's pretty cheap to find in very long lengths, and you can run 4-inch hose on both the inlet side and the outlet side. And the exact same adapter that I showed you guys for the AP2 that I offer on my website will work on both the inlet and outlet side, so you can go find that in the video description down below. I'll place a link to that as well as some of this really awesome high quality 4-inch hose. I'm trying to give you guys as many options as possible to build out your own custom solution for your smoke and fume extraction. If you guys have any concerns about the airflow on the 4-inch hose, not to worry, I've tested it pretty thoroughly already with the brand new xTool P2S, and this thing blows extremely hard even through 4-inch hose. The P2S video is in the works and I'll be releasing that soon. And the reason I'm not doing it in this video is because these two units, the AP2 and the IF2, are not intended to be used together. You don't want to be forcing high velocity air from the IF2 through the AP2, as it may reduce the efficiency of the filtration. So essentially the concept is that you picked one or the other depending on whether or not you want to filter or exhaust outside, and in either condition you control these smart devices through the Bluetooth dongle right through xTool Creative Space. And just to reiterate, if you don't have one of the newer xTool machines that is compatible with the Bluetooth dongle, you can control the IF2 with this manual controller. I did hear on one of the xTool live streams that they may try and make it backwards compatible, but no guarantees at this point. And finally, one of the really nice things about the IF2 is that you can disassemble it to clean it. Just make sure, of course, you have it unplugged. Just remove 4 of the screws, pull the unit apart, and then the fan cartridge comes out after you disconnect the 2 electrical connectors. And apparently you can rinse this fan. Of course, you don't want to submerge it underwater, and they tell you not to get the electrical connectors themselves wet, but that's pretty cool. And if you're concerned about noise, apparently there's a silent mode that you can select inside of xTool Creative Space. Now, I haven't tried that yet, but that should make it quieter than one of these traditional inline fans. We'll get started with testing out the AP2 with some traditionally stinky materials on the F1 Ultra. But before we do that, if you guys are regular viewers of this channel, you may have seen in previous videos that I have this adapter that allows you to adapt some of my jigs and fixtures from the regular xTool F1 over to the F1 Ultra. I recently improved this tool and it looks like this now. So you got 4 pieces, and each of those pieces attached to the corners of the grid pattern on the base plate of the F1 Ultra. Each of the 4 identical pieces gets 2 of these screws, and it allows you to adjust them in and out a little bit to account for different fixtures and jigs. For example, if you've made your own, they might be a slightly different size than mine. You can still fit a single fixture right in the middle, but the cool thing now is that you can panelize the fixtures into a grid shape, so you can increase efficiency and productivity by running more than one workpiece at a time. Now, because you'll need 4 identical fixtures to do this, I'll be running bundle deals on these fixtures on my website, embracemaking.com. Additionally, if you want to keep yourself organized with the fixtures and jigs, I've got this fixture organizer stand that is expandable, so you can put your collection of F1 sized fixtures into the stand, and it will expand with your collection, and you can keep your workspace neat and tidy. Now let's go ahead and test out the xTool Air Purifier 2 with some wood. Engraving and cutting wood tends to make quite a bit of smoke, and while it's certainly not the most offensive smelling material, it does seem to be a smell that the human nose picks up pretty easily. And so I'll start with a simple engraving of this hexagon pattern on a wood coaster. Now, I'm not entirely sure which species of wood these coasters are, so I'm just going to go ahead and select 6mm pine plywood, as I think the color and lightness of the wood is a pretty good match. Now, just a reminder, the focus of this video is not about the material settings or these individual projects themselves. Therefore, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the settings, but I will try in some cases to adjust some of these settings if the result isn't great, or perhaps if I want to make more smoke. And in this case, the first engraving test was kind of on the weak side. The engraving didn't turn out dark enough with those pine settings, so I did increase the power a little bit. And this produced a much darker engraving, not surprisingly. The result looked very good, but most importantly, I couldn't smell a single thing with the AP2 attached. The only point at which I began to smell burning wood was when I took the material out of the machine, and perhaps there was a little bit of smoke left over. So I'm going to go into xTool Creative Space and adjust the time at which that fan continues to run inside of the AP2 after the job is done. And now I'm going to install 4 fixtures so that I can run 4 of these coasters at once. And you'll notice that the focus dot now falls in between all those materials. So a simple trick here is just to add a piece of paper on top and then focus on that piece of paper. And that's a quick and easy focusing trick to use if you're using my grid tool here. Alternatively, you can just take a single fixture and place it on top of the grid supports right in the center, hold it in place, and then get your focus before you start your job. Now that we can do 4 coasters at once, this will allow us to produce even more smoke for a longer duration of time. So I think this will be a better test for the air purifier. I'm going to add 4 of these different designs to the layout, and some of them will require some sort of modification, as I generally like to turn most of them into vectors. But I did find all of these graphics on xTool Design Find, which you can find right inside of xTool Creative Space. So I would highly encourage you guys to go check that out for some of your projects. And I'm just going to increase the power to 85%. So I'll get that darker engrave like I got on the first coaster, and then I'll run this job and do the smell test. And if you guys are looking for any of these coasters, I'll put a link to them in the video description down below. The kit comes with square as well as round wooden coasters, and I'll show you guys the result at the end. But in terms of the air purifier doing its job, at this point I was extremely impressed because I did see a lot of smoke coming off of those coasters, and I even put one of my air quality detectors right near the outlet of the AP2, and not even for a single moment did the air quality detector start to beep or indicate that there were any rising levels of particulates. So I thought that was extremely impressive, because even with the older xTool air filter, the original one, it was pretty good, but you could still smell some of the burning wood. The main thing with the old one was that your room wouldn't get filled with smoke. However, with the brand new Air Purifier 2, it eliminates both the smell as well as any of the smoke. So you can see my work area here, no smoke outside of the F1 Ultra, and it's passed the smell test with flying colors. I let the air purifier run for 20 to 30 seconds after the job was done, and when I opened the lid, you could still smell burning wood just a little bit because I find that the scent will stick to the workpieces, but it was definitely better than the first coaster that I did where the air purifier was only running for 10 seconds after the job was done. Then I took those 4 coasters and hit some of these surfaces where there was a little bit of charring with some sandpaper, then I added a little bit of wood stain, and this mini project turned out looking pretty good. One other thing I tried was cutting through some 3mm basswood on the F1 Ultra, and it's not really ideal because there is no air assist on the F1 Ultra, so this was more of a controlled burn in my opinion. But I thought this was actually kind of a good thing because with the material literally on fire, I still couldn't smell any wood burning in my room. So for wood, I'm giving this thing an A+. Next we've got acrylic, which is definitely very stinky, and this is much more of an offensive smell even in small amounts compared to burning wood, for example. And God only knows what you're breathing in when you're burning plastic, so this is going to be a very important test for me because it's one of the reasons I generally try and avoid cutting or engraving acrylic unless I can do it in a really safe environment. So if I can process 4 of these acrylic coasters with these pretty dense designs and not smell anything in my enclosed room, that would be a game changer for me. So we'll get this test started, and if you guys were paying attention to what I was doing in xTool Creative Space there, you'll see that I simply selected the black acrylic preset inside of xTool Creative Space using their Easy Set library, and I didn't make any modifications to those settings. And during this job, I was keeping an eye on the air quality monitor. Again, it was placed right near the back of the Air Purifier 2 where any of the exhaust would come out, and that monitor did not warn me a single time about any increased levels of formaldehyde, which is the first reading on that air quality detector. So that's HCHO, and that's a harmful compound that is generally released when you're engraving or cutting acrylic. And speaking of cutting, we are going to cut some acrylic here. So I'm going to remove my fixtures and I'm going to switch over to the xTool cutting platform. And it also sits perfectly in the pocket of my fixture adapter, so you don't need to remove that. So it's been designed not to lose any productivity time switching back and forth between engraving with fixtures and cutting with this base plate. You'll notice that I placed the fins pointing towards the fan, so any fumes that get pushed under the workpiece can hopefully get sucked back towards the fan and they won't get stuck in between those fins. I'm also going to place some orange acrylic around the black workpiece so it's very easy to see where the borders are in xTool Creative Space. Sometimes it's hard to see those details of a black material on top of that black base plate. This is something I also do inside of the S1 as well as the P2 and P2S, as the insides of those machines are generally even darker than the F1 Ultra. The 20-watt blue diode laser of the F1 Ultra can definitely cut through this 3mm thick black acrylic, but the CO2 laser of the P2 and P2S series seems to be quite a bit more efficient when it comes to cutting the acrylic. So I wasn't really sure how those finer details of this design were going to turn out, but again, you can see the amount of smoke and fumes coming off that workpiece, and the air quality detector is not indicating any dangerous condition due to increased levels of formaldehyde. And I was shocked that, again, I couldn't smell a single thing. If I was doing this before the newest AP2, I'd have multiple room filters on, I'd be trying to open windows and create any sort of room ventilation that I could, but in this case I didn't have to do any of that, and I was pretty astounded by that fact, unlike the results of my ornament, which could use some work. Moving on to leather, this is another material where I'm not entirely certain how dangerous it is to breathe in the smoke and fumes, but it is something that smells really terrible, and maybe that's because you're kind of burning flesh in a way. And keep in mind, this is real leather that we're talking about here, not the fake polyurethane leather, and it's certainly not vinyl. Under no circumstances, even with the AP2, would I recommend that you ever try and engrave or cut vinyl-based fake leathers. After this genuine leather luggage tag, we will get into engraving some PU-based fake leather, but for now we can see the F1 Ultra working its magic on this genuine leather tag. And although my air quality sensor never indicated any rising levels of dangerous compounds, truthfully, I could still smell this one just a little bit. It was worse when I pulled the material out of the F1 Ultra, as I think a lot of that smell sticks to the workpiece quite a bit. And that's not something that the air purifier can realistically take care of anyways. So if you're a person that's working with real genuine leather, I'd probably recommend that you take your workpieces and just air them out outside after you're done engraving them. Next, I've got these PU-based fake leather keychains, and I'm going to set one of those up in my keychain fixture. And I'm running out of these things, so I've only got 2 of them to work with instead of loading up all 4 into the fixture. But I'm not too worried about that because I really don't anticipate this smelling too bad. My experience with the PU fake leather is that the smell is only a fraction of that of the genuine leather. There's a preset available for this material inside of xTool's Material Easy Set library. So I'll run with those settings and it should give us a nice, crisp, dark engraving on this surface, and we'll see if we can smell anything here. The smoke is certainly less intense than some of the other materials, but you can definitely still see some of it coming off of the workpieces. But as I had anticipated, I couldn't smell anything, and the air quality detector was happy throughout this whole process. The only thing I would improve was the placement of my graphic, which I should have put a little bit higher, but I was trying to avoid that metal rivet.
So I do think it's great that xTool is prioritizing health and safety, but even beyond the safety aspect, which you'll hear everybody talk about on YouTube, the thing that's most important or exciting to me is that they're improving the overall user experience just in general. Anytime anybody gets into the hobby or wants to start a business of laser cutting and engraving, oftentimes they buy a machine and the smoke and fume extraction aspect of things is just an afterthought, and your new hobby or your new business quickly becomes very unenjoyable when your workspace is filled with smoke or it really starts to smell. For quite some time now, there have been some mediocre to half-decent solutions out there for smoke and fume filtration that come at a reasonable price. Now, it's not until you got into the industrial level, which you would find something like this, or perhaps even better, because of course it's intended for an industrial setting and it comes with an industrial price. So at this price level, especially with the current promotional sales going on, I don't think you're gonna find anything else that's going to even touch this thing. So I would highly encourage you guys, if you're looking for something like this, check the links in the video description down below to take advantage of the sale price. Now, if you're watching this video at a much later date and you've missed those sale prices, I do think it's still very good value at full price. Again, I don't think even at full price, you're gonna find something, at least at the time of the making of this video, that's gonna compete with this thing. And that's especially considering that you can replace each of the filter layers individually. So that'll save you a lot of money because you don't have to buy a giant filter pack. And if you're using an xTool machine, the fact that it integrates with the newer machines through Bluetooth is super convenient and very easy to use. Now, if I had to choose between the AP2 and the IF2, I would 100% go with the AP2 as long as it was within my budget. And that's because it's just a lot more flexible. So because it filters the smoke and fumes, you can use it indoors. But if you did have a workshop where you could still ventilate the exhaust outside, you still have that option with the AP2. The IF2 is still a very nice solution, but it's a lot more one-dimensional in the sense that it can only move smoke and fumes from one location to the other because obviously it doesn't have the ability to filter anything. So really the only place you can use it is in a situation where you can ventilate those smoke and fumes outside. And the other nice thing is that it is washable, which I showed you guys earlier in the video, how to disassemble it and how to wash out the fan blades. That's a nice feature. And the other big thing to consider, of course, is price. The IF2 is much cheaper than the AP2. So if price is the sticking point for you, then the IF2 is probably the solution for you. With either choice, I'm just happy that xTool is investing time and resources into making these kinds of products. And that's because they do such a great job at integrating them into the whole xTool ecosystem. So for example, like I showed you guys earlier in the video, the XCS software will recognize these accessories connected to your machines, and you can even see how much filter life is left on each of these filter levels with the AP2, for example, or you can control things like the airflow level or the runtime of the fans after your job is done. And it's just one less thing to worry about when you're producing your projects or products. And it just makes everything very easy and convenient to use. You can let the software take over and just run everything automatically. So that's it. Hopefully now you guys have a better understanding of what these two things are all about and how you can use them in your situation. And if you guys are still on the fence about them, perhaps you should check out the links in the video description down below, as well as the promo codes that I've got down there. Perhaps those discounts and deals might convince you. And if you're looking for anything else that I've used in this video, for example, materials, the fixtures that I offer, or even the hose adapters, you can find links to those in the video description and on my website, embracemaking.com. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you next time.